Alright, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time of day you're reviewing this particular video. Again, this is the second video for Intro to Excel, Introduction to Spreadsheets. Just to kind of recap on the first video, we covered some navigation within Microsoft Excel. Now we're going to look at more of entering and editing data into cells. So I'm going to go ahead and enable PowerPoint at this point in time. And before we get into actually entering and editing cells and data, I want to cover planning the worksheet design, because this should take precedence before you actually enter in the data. So there are 8 steps in planning the design of your Excel worksheet. The first step is going to be stating the purpose or defining the purpose of the worksheet itself. This is just basically identifying what you're attempting to do with this worksheet. After you identify the purpose of the worksheet, the next step is going to be identifying and defining the outputs required to satisfy the worksheet's purpose. These are just simply identifying the outputs that you're required to calculate, whether it be sales figures or whatever information that you're trying to get to. After you identify the outputs, you need to identify the inputs. A lot of people may think that that's a little backwards, but if you think about it, you need to figure out what your solution is, and how to get there would be through defining what data are required for inputs in order to get your outputs. So again, this will be your sales figures, your months, your commission rates, things of that nature. So again, once you've defined those, we move on to the fourth step, which is entering the labels, values, and formulas. This is actually hand jamming the information or inputting the information into the Excel spreadsheet. After you've gone ahead and input your information into the spreadsheet, the next step would be going back and checking through formatting your numerical values. This would be any dollar figures. This would be numerical values, whether they have decimal places, how many decimal places, and the alignment that you would require for this particular worksheet. After you format the numerical values, the next step is formatting the descriptive titles and labels, documenting what metadata about the data that you're working with, whether it be a header for the actual worksheet itself, labels that and header columns that identify, provide meaning behind the data that you're working with. And then after you have gone through those 6 steps, the final 2 steps are kind of the documentation and just the identification of the workbook in itself as possible, as much as possible. Things about the workbook, what the title of the workbook is, providing some metadata about the workbook itself. And then the final step will be sharing your completed workbook and saving it to shared drive, saving it to your local computer, your OneDrive account, and then sharing that with all parties necessary. So now that we've kind of covered explaining the worksheet design, let's go ahead and talk about entering in some information on that worksheet. So what I have here in my Excel book is I have a spreadsheet here. We'll go through entering some of this information, and let's go back to our slideshow for just 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. We're going to cover a couple of different components of entering and editing sale data. The first thing I want to point out is I just want to go over some definitions. Text is defined as a combination of letters, numbers, symbols, and spaces not used in calculation. So again, these are going to be your column headers. These are going to be your text information that is again not specific to any type of numerical calculation. By default, these values are aligned to the left in the cell alignment. And then we'll look at a couple of additional features: autocomplete and autofill. So autocomplete feature is a feature that searches for and automatically displays any other label in the same column matching the letters that you type. So if you have a particular value in a column that appears more than once as you begin to type that value in, or that text value in, a second time, that autocomplete feature will then find where you've used it previously and then give you the option to go ahead and autocomplete. Autofill is a feature that assists with completion of a sequence of words or values. This will allow you to go ahead and, if you're doing anything with calculations or even formulas, it will allow you to take the next value in the sequence and apply that further on down the column or across the row, depending on which way that you would like the values to appear. And then let's go ahead and talk about values. Values are numbers that represent a quantity or a measurable amount. And this is not restricted to numerical values, because dates and times are values that can be entered and also displayed in a variety of formats. Alright, let's go ahead and move over to our Excel spreadsheet, where I have an example here of entering in text. So I've got just a simple spreadsheet that I've created. We're going to do a little bit of calculations or a little bit of execution of entering in data. So I'm looking at tracking some of my top sales associates with regard to sales over the course of a month. So in my first column here, I've entered in the text of January. And again, as I mentioned before earlier, we can use the autofill feature to go ahead and populate the subsequent months of the year for calculating and identifying our top sales associate. So if you look down at the bottom right of that particular cell that I have active, my cursor changes into a plus sign, a crosshair. When you click and drag that down, you'll notice that the values are incremented by the month as I drag them down. So that's one way you can use the autofill feature. Now, for example, here I have Mr. Mark Smith as my top sales associate for the month of January. And let's just say, for example, we have a new associate by the name of Anita Baker, who is the top selling associate for that month. But for the month of March, Mr. Mark Smith is our top sales associate again. Now, if you notice, whenever I type in the first letter M, it gives me the option, using the autocomplete feature, to go ahead and default that line to Mr. Mark Smith, which I can go ahead and, by clicking enter, I accept that entry in there. Okay, so that covers essentially the autofill and autocomplete features. Let's look at entering in some values that represent a date or a time. So values here we're looking at here is a sales amount for the month of January, and Miss Baker, let's say she has a really good sales amount for the month of March, or I'm sorry, the month of February. So we type in the value and we click enter, and we look at that and it says, hey, this looks like text. Again, how do we know it looks like text? Because it is left aligned. So to change this value to a numeric value or even a currency value, we right click, come down to the Format Cells menu, and it gives us our category for formatting. And we can either select the accounting method, which gives us a symbol, or we can select currency, and again indicate the decimal places, and we can also provide how we want negative numbers to go ahead and be displayed in this particular worksheet and cell. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the default for currency with the $sign symbol, 2 decimal places, and once we click OK, I'll fix my value here. It applies that value in. Okay. For this particular value, we go down to Format Cells. You'll notice I selected the accounting display value. But again, if we select currency, it matches the previous or the subsequent level. So again, that's entering in a value. Let's talk about entering in dates and times. So we have closing dates of sales, and again, this is just for simple record keeping, not really too useful for this particular purpose, but just for demonstration. So again, I'm going to go ahead down here for the month of April, and there are closing sales are going to be 30 April. So again, I'm going to go and type in 04/30/2016. Now when I click enter, it takes that value and it puts it in there. If we right click and go down to format cells for that particular, we look at under the format cells, it gives a category and pre-select date. It identified that already as a date format. But you can go ahead and you can specify how you would like to have that particular date format put into your spreadsheet. So we're going to go ahead and select the same to match what we have in our previous value. So we have 30-April, and it accepts that value into the cell. Now comes the next question of how do we edit or how do we clear any contents in the cell? It's very simple. You can do one of two ways to go ahead and edit the content of the cell. You can first click the cell that you want to edit. You can go into the format bar and make the edit, or you can click on that and hit the F2 button. It will go ahead and make the cell active. You notice that your cursor is to the right of the date, and it gives you the ability to go and backspace within the cell, change the information as required. Let's go ahead and just assume that we've entered in our data. Again, you hit enter. It takes the formatting that you selected and puts the data in the proper format according to what you select. To clear the contents of a cell, just say, for example, you entered in the wrong sales date, sales amount for an individual. Highlight the cell. Again, noticing by the name box what is the current active cell. You can go up here to your ribbon, select Clear All, Clear Formats, Clear Contents, Clear Comments, or Clear Hyperlinks if those existed. So you can clear one of many things by using this feature. Clear All gets rid of formatting, contents, everything. If you clear the format, that just removes the format that you applied to that cell, or to clear contents, you just click Clear Contents, and that removes the value of the cell. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at ryan.free@ppcc.edu.